Hey everybody, and welcome to the Deep Dive. We're diving into Gavin de Becker's The Gift of Fear today.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Have you read this one?
I have. It's been a while, but yeah, I remember it pretty vividly.
You had a good one, right?
Oh, yeah.
So we're going to be talking about trusting your gut and spotting danger before it escalates.
That's right. And, it kind of flips the script on how we think about fear.
Yeah.
It's not about being paranoid.
Right.
It's more about just tapping into an internal guidance system that we all have.
Totally. It's like we've been told to ignore this inner voice for so long that we don't even know how to listen to it anymore.
Right.
What's the core idea here that really stuck with you?
Well, de Becker, his main argument is that fear is not a weakness, but a vital survival tool.
Okay.
He says our instincts are constantly picking up on these subtle cues. He calls them pre-incident indicators.
Pre-incident indicators.
Or pins.
Oh, pins. Got it.
So these are like red flags waving before something bad happens. So those little warning bells that are going off in our heads.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, can you give me like a concrete example?
Sure. So let's say you're on a first date.
Okay.
And the person insists on walking you to your car,
Mm-hmm.
even though you've said you're fine.
Yeah.
That pushiness, that disregard for your boundaries,
Right.
that could be a panin.
Right. I see. So it's not about just like being afraid of everybody. It's about
Right.
recognizing those specific behaviors.
Exactly. It's the behaviors
Okay.
that signal potential danger.
That's what I think is so fascinating about this book.
Yeah.
What about this?
Well, and another common panin is force teaming.
Force teaming.
Yeah. So this is where someone tries to create an artificial bond
Okay.
to try to lower your guard.
Oh, interesting.
They might say things like, we're both stuck in this crazy elevator together,
Right.
as if you're old friends.
Right. So they're trying to like fast forward the relationship.
Exactly. To a level of trust.
That's not really there.
That isn't really there yet.
I can see how that would be so disarming.
Totally.
What are some other examples of these pins?
Well, de Becker also talks about how excessive charm can be a potential red flag.
Okay.
Not all charm is bad, of course,
Right.
but sometimes it's used to manipulate and control.
Okay. So it's like they're trying to bypass your logical defenses with like
Exactly.
flattery and smooth talk.
Right, you got it.
It's
And then another pin he mentions is typecasting.
typecasting.
So this is when someone kind of insults you
Okay.
to provoke a reaction and get you to engage with them
Oh, wow.
on their terms.
Yeah.
Like they might say, oh, you're probably too busy to help me with this small favor,
Right.
hoping that you'll bend over backwards to prove them wrong.
Wow. That's so subtle.
It is very subtle.
Like I can see how that could be very effective at making someone feel obligated.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
It would also be really easy to just like write those things off as just being like overly sensitive or rude.
Yeah, that's the danger.
Yeah.
Becker calls that denial.
Okay.
And he says it's one of the biggest obstacles to personal safety.
So we're basically ignoring these red flags because
You are.
we don't want to seem paranoid
Yeah,
or impolite.
you got it.
That seems like a recipe for disaster.
It can be, for sure.
Yeah.
Ignoring those early warning signs can have serious consequences.
So he's saying like we really need to recognize and trust our gift of fear.
Exactly.
Okay, so acknowledging those feelings is the first step.
Right.
But what do we actually do with them?
Well, once you're aware of those pins,
Okay.
you can start setting clear boundaries.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to just say no.
But doesn't that make you seem
Yeah.
like kind of rude? I feel like
Yeah, totally.
our society definitely puts a premium on being agreeable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But de Becker would argue that prioritizing your safety is never rude.
Okay.
He really encourages this shift in mindset where we value our well-being above social pressures.
I'm starting to see how this all fits together now.
Yeah.
It's the awareness of the pins, the boundaries,
Yep.
and pushing past that fear of being impolite.
You got it.
Is there more?
There's a lot more. Yeah.
Okay.
He provides a whole toolkit for navigating these situations.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about assessing risk objectively
Okay.
and crucially having a plan.
So it's not just reacting to the danger,
It's not just reacting.
but proactively thinking ahead.
It-
So like, what does that look like practically?
Okay, so let's say you're going on a first date with someone you met online.
Okay.
De Becker might suggest sharing your plans with a friend,
Mm-hmm.
setting a time to check in,
Okay.
or choosing a public place to meet.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So you're not just putting yourself
Exactly.
in a vulnerable position.
Yeah, minimizing the risk.
And I bet he has even more specific advice
Oh, yeah.
for situations like dealing with a stalker or harassment at work.
He does, definitely.
I think we should save that, though,
Okay.
for our next segment.
Sounds good.
There's a lot to unpack there.
There is, yeah.
So it seems like the big takeaway for our listener right now is
Yeah.
don't dismiss those gut feelings.
Trust your gut.
They might be trying to tell you something super important.
Exactly.
And learn to recognize those red flags,
Yes.
those pre-incident indicators,
Mm-hmm.
and don't be afraid to set those boundaries.
Exactly. That's right.
It's about prioritizing your safety,
Absolutely.
which is never rude.
Never rude.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We are digging even deeper now into Gavin de Becker's The Gift of Fear,
That's right.
learning how to understand our intuition.
Yes.
We talked about those pre-incident indicators, those pins last time,
Mhm.
those subtle little red flags
Right.
that often precede danger. But how do those principles
Yeah.
apply in really specific high-stakes situations?
That's where it gets really interesting. You know, de Becker dives into scenarios like stalking and workplace violence.
okay.
And he really provides a framework for recognizing the patterns of behavior
Mm-hmm.
that often escalate into danger.
Okay, let's start with stalking.
Okay.
It's a subject that is terrifying and unfortunately all too common.
Yeah.
What does de Becker have to say about recognizing and dealing with a stalker?
Well, he emphasizes that stalking rarely comes out of nowhere.
Okay.
It usually involves a pattern of escalating behavior.
Okay.
You know, those seemingly harmless actions,
Mm.
like unwanted gifts or constant calls,
Mhm.
can quickly morph into something far more threatening.
So those early behaviors, even if they seem small, could actually be
Could be.
major red flags.
Exactly. And one of the biggest mistakes people make is trying to reason with a stalker,
Okay.
or even worse, appease them.
I can see how someone would try to do that,
Yeah.
especially if it's someone they know, thinking, if I just explain myself, they'll back off.
Right,
But
yeah.
that's counterproductive.
Yeah. De Becker's very clear on this.
Yeah.
Stalkers are often driven by a need for control,
Okay.
and any attempt to engage with them can be misinterpreted as encouragement.
So cutting off contact completely is the best approach.
It is, yeah.
That must be incredibly difficult, especially if there's a prior relationship.
It is very difficult.
Mhm.
But de Becker stresses that your safety is paramount.
Okay.
He recommends documenting every interaction,
Okay.
setting firm boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
and involving law enforcement if necessary.
Okay.
Even those incidents that seem minor
Yeah.
can help build a case later on.
So documentation is key, even if it feels like overkill at the time.
Exactly.
But what about those situations where a stalker is relentless?
Yeah.
What specific steps can someone take to protect themselves?
Well, no contact.
Okay.
No calls, no texts, no emails, nothing.
Okay.
The goal is to make it crystal clear that you want absolutely no contact.
It's like you have to disappear from their radar completely.
Right.
That sounds emotionally draining.
It can be, yeah.
Yeah.
De Becker acknowledges the toll this can take,
Mm-hmm.
but he emphasizes that removing yourself from the situation
Right.
is often the best way to protect your emotional and physical well-being.
Let's shift gears a bit and talk about workplace violence, another issue that's becoming increasingly prevalent these days.
Yeah, for sure.
What insights does de Becker offer on recognizing and addressing
Mhm.
potential threats at work?
He provides some really insightful strategies
Okay.
for navigating this really complex issue.
Okay.
First, he emphasizes the importance of taking all threats seriously,
Okay.
even if they seem like empty words.
So not just brushing things off as venting or blowing off steam.
Exactly.
Even if a threat doesn't seem credible, it still warrants
It does.
attention.
Absolutely. Any threat of violence, no matter how casual it may seem, should be reported to the appropriate authorities immediately.
Okay.
It's always better to err on the side of caution.
That makes sense. Early intervention
Right.
could prevent something terrible from happening.
Right.
But what about those more subtle signs of trouble? Are there any red flags we should be looking out for in the
Yeah.
workplace?
He talks about the importance of fostering a workplace culture that values safety
Okay.
and encourages open communication.
Okay.
So employers should have clear policies
Right.
regarding harassment, bullying, and threats of violence.
Yeah.
And employees need to feel comfortable reporting any concerns without fear of reprisal.
So it's not just about having the rules on paper. It's about
Exactly.
creating an environment where people feel safe speaking up.
You got it.
What specific steps can companies take to actually create that kind of culture?
Well, de Becker suggests things like regular safety drills,
Okay.
clear evacuation procedures, and training for managers on recognizing and addressing potential warning signs.
So it's about being proactive and
Right.
prepared, not just reactive.
Exactly.
That brings up something I've been wondering about.
Yeah.
De Becker talks a lot about external threats, but he also emphasizes recognizing our own internal vulnerabilities.
He does.
What does he mean by that?
He's talking about the role of denial.
Okay.
We often downplay our intuition, telling ourselves we're being oversensitive or rude if we acknowledge those uneasy feelings.
Yeah.
But those feelings are often trying to protect us.
I can definitely relate to that. Sometimes it's easier to ignore those warning bells than to face them head on.
Absolutely.
But how do we break out of that denial and start trusting our gut more?
Well, De Becker encourages us to become more mindful of our thoughts and feelings.
Okay.
Ask yourself, why am I hesitant to trust this feeling? Am I afraid of being wrong?
Yeah.
Am I worried about offending someone?
Right.
Often by simply acknowledging those fears, we can start to loosen their grip on us.
So it's about recognizing that those feelings are valid,
They are.
even if they turn out to be unfounded. Better safe than sorry, right?
Exactly. De Becker argues that we need to shift our mindset and prioritize our safety above those ingrained social pressures.
Right.
To be polite and agreeable,
Yeah.
sometimes rude, is the best way to protect yourself.
And he provides some pretty stark examples of how denial
He does.
can have devastating consequences.
Absolutely. He shares stories of people who ignored their intuition
Right.
and ended up in dangerous situations.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that those gut feelings are there for a reason.
It seems like we've covered a lot of ground,
We have.
but there's still more to explore.
Always more.
In our next segment, I'd love to delve deeper into De Becker's practical advice on setting boundaries
Okay.
and dealing with those tricky situations where politeness and safety collide.
I like it.
What do you think?
Absolutely. There's a lot more to unpack.
Okay.
Let's continue this deep dive in part 3.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been talking about Gavin de Becker's The Gift of Fear,
Yes.
learning to really tune in to our intuition, recognize those subtle signs of danger.
That's right.
We talked about those pre-incident indicators, the
Yes.
pins,
Yeah.
and how important it is to set boundaries,
Right.
even if it means kind of pushing past those social pressures to be polite.
Absolutely.
But what about those really tricky situations where we feel torn between, being courteous and staying safe?
Well, De Becker offers a really helpful concept for navigating those gray areas.
Okay.
He calls it messenger reliability.
Messenger reliability.
Yeah. And it's about evaluating the credibility of the person or the situation,
Okay.
not just blindly accepting everything at face value.
So it's not about being suspicious of everyone,
No.
but it's about applying a healthy dose of skepticism
Exactly.
to the people that we meet.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
We tend to trust authority figures.
Right.
Or people who seem really confident and charming.
Yeah, they seem trustworthy.
Right. But De Becker cautions us to look beyond appearances.
Okay.
He reminds us that, for example, con artists are masters of deception,
Right.
using charm and flattery or even intimidation to manipulate their victims.
So someone could be presenting themselves as completely trustworthy, but their actions might be telling a very different story.
Exactly.
How do we learn to spot those inconsistencies?
Well, De Becker encourages us to ask ourselves, does this person's behavior match their words?
Okay.
He wants us to be discerning and not be afraid to question things that seem too good to be true
Okay.
or just feel off.
Just feels wrong.
Right, like something's not right here.
And that reminds me of a point he made
Yeah,
about how we often ignore our intuition
we do.
because we don't want to appear rude
Like-
or judgmental.
Absolutely.
He uses the phrase discounting the messenger.
Yeah.
Like we're so focused on being polite
Right.
that we miss those crucial warning signs.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
So we're being mindful of those pins. We're evaluating messenger reliability.
Right.
But how do we actually put this into practice?
Yeah, that's the question.
So let's say you're walking alone at night
Okay.
and someone approaches you, acting friendly, but giving you a bad vibe.
Right. Trust your gut.
Just your gut.
You don't have to be rude,
Okay.
but you also don't owe anyone an explanation. You can simply say, I'm sorry, I'm not comfortable talking right now,
Okay.
and keep moving.
So it's about setting those boundaries
It is.
and trusting that our intuition is guiding us in the right direction.
Absolutely. You have the right to protect your personal space and emotional well-being.
What about those situations where you feel pressured to do something that you don't want to do.
Yeah.
Maybe because of social expectations or fear of judgment.
Like going to a party where you know someone who makes you uncomfortable will be there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What would de Becker say about that?
Well, he would remind us that no is a complete sentence.
Okay.
You don't have to justify your decisions or make excuses. You can politely decline an invitation without feeling obligated to elaborate.
Oh my gosh, I am so guilty of over-explaining.
Right, we all do it.
When I just want to say no.
Yeah,
It's so ingrained in us to be accommodating.
it is. But de Becker encourages us to reclaim our power and assert our boundaries.
Okay.
Remember, your safety and peace of mind are more important than anyone's opinion.
This has really been about empowering ourselves, hasn't it?
It really has, yeah.
It's about recognizing that we have the tools to navigate potentially dangerous situations and make choices that prioritize our well-being.
Absolutely.
It's been awesome.
It has.
This deep dive into the gift of fear has been so insightful.
Lots to think about.
Yeah, for our listener out there, remember, you have this incredible ability to sense danger
You do.
and protect yourself.
That's right.
Trust your intuition, set those boundaries,
Yeah.
and never be afraid to say no.
No is a complete sentence.
And if you haven't already, definitely check out The Gift of Fear.
It's a good one.
Yeah, it might just change your life.
Yeah, could do.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.